environment is so important for all of us, for you, for me, for everybody, and it's recharging and it's inspirational, and so I'm just so happy that you are here and that we get to share part of this day with you. So I'm a librarian here at Murphy Library, and I am the engagement and curriculum collection librarian. So I work a lot with outreaching to the community, whether that be the public or K through 12. That is my the thing that I do in the library, and I run the children's collection for the School of Education. And I guess the bottom line that I am always trying to get to, and that inspires me the most, is information literacy to younger kids before they get to us, so that when they get to us, we can have more of an engaging and push the conversation a little bit further. So that's my bottom line.
And my name is Jim Carlson, and I was a high school English teacher in Bangor for a while, so I see Dion here, and my colleagues, other colleagues, and I currently work in the Department of Ed Studies here. I have a group of teacher candidates that either had me in the past or with me right now. And it's exciting to be here to be talking about kind of what I think. As I was taking out the trash last night, I talked a lot about literacy in my life. And as I was taking out the trash, I realized today's talk is really promoting what I call misinformation literacy. I think that's a new era, and I don't know if that term has been coined yet, but...
So I just completely lost your thing, so
oh, okay.
you can keep talking, I'm just going to pull up
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I think we're going to get started today with probably kind of access some prior knowledge, and hand out some statements, and you'll work with people at the table to try to figure out are these true or is this false. That's where we'll start today. Then I think we'll have a poll everywhere kind of question, poll the audience for things that you're already doing in your classroom to fight fake news, and also trying to figure out what is it that you hope to take from here. And then I think we'll be diving into some resources that we've come across in the past few weeks as we prepare for this, and hopefully you have time to play around with.
I'm just going to check my, after we start. You can keep going, and I'm going to check my username for something.
So you're just seeing here, right, Google Trend, the topic of fake news has spiked in the past year at various points in time. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about where we're headed today. So the first activity that we'll ask you to complete at your table, and Mr. Sprain, if you could help me.
Okay, you.
Yeah,
You would help too.
So what you have in front of you, or will be in front of you, just a number of statements, sort of like an anticipation guide. But what we're asking you to do is to really have a conversation about the statements that you see. We're asking you to agree or disagree with the statement. In many cases, is this true or is this false? My students will tell you that I, in my class, preach about anticipation guides should be no more than 5 to 7 statements. I get carried away with 20. Yes. But is of these statements, are there any that you need to know, like, the answer to? Any that are really bugging you couldn't decide? Faygo is a soda. It's a cheap soda. And that statement about the insane clown posse, what number is that? 4. Number 4. They were in town last Friday, recently, 2 Fridays ago. And about a few hours before showtime, the La Crosse Fire Department had read in the previous day's newspaper that they used plastic in the theater to protect the stage from the Faygo. But the fire department checked, it wasn't fireproof, it wasn't up to code, it was a violation of their insurance policy. And so an hour before the show, they had to postpone it an hour and hope that they could put up the right material. And I didn't get to go, but based on Facebook, the concert did happen, and It took a long time to clean up, but
So what's it, they squirt Faygo?
they squirt Faygo, yeah. Not the, it's the diet kind, but it doesn't have sugar, but I think it's something related to their roots growing up poor in Detroit, Michigan. And the fans expected, they won't do a show unless they can spray Faygo. Any other questions? That's number 4. Are there other statements? Reese's peanut butter cups, that's fake news. They're not discontinuing, but I'm sure that news doesn't hurt sales around this time of year. About number 3, the NFL. This is the only one that I'm kind of like, there's little bits of truth, I think, in that statement. So I think that there is a statement about you have to be on the sideline, but maybe there's not a statement that you have to stand. And so there's a mixture in that one. Of course, that's a hot button issue right now.
Well, actually, I'm curious about the Reese's peanut butter. How many of you agreed? How many of you agreed with that?
What number is that?
The Reese's peanut
10.
number 10. Okay, and if there had been a reason, would that have made you think that maybe it was truer? So when I looked at that, I thought, well, they're not giving a reason, so I'm not going to agree with that. But if there had been a reason, I may have said, yeah, I agree. Just curious.
Will O.J. Simpson, is he coming to Green Bay? But he was released recently, and I did start to see memes indicating on social media that he was headed to Green Bay. I think they lost some running backs recently. They did Donald Trump actually sue the NFL and win?
He sued, but he didn't win, right?
He sued, and the jury did award $1.
Okay.
But yes, he was, and I don't know that it's him personally, but he was with a group of people. They had a United States Football League that was playing in the spring in the 82, 83, 84, and when he tried to move the team to the fall, no TV network would pick them up, and so he sued the NFL for having a monopoly. And he did win. It was $1, and because it was some kind of antitrust thing, he actually, I think, was awarded $3.67. But there is, he was not banned for a lifetime from the NFL, and I think that's some of the fake news that's going around in recent days about that.
Number 12.
Number 12, you have heard that? That's true, he paid $75,000.
He paid?
Yes, he bought that for some reason. I don't think he didn't really know Marilyn Monroe, as I understand it, but he knew he was. He heard of her. He was. I think she was on the first Playboy issue. She was the first cover and centerfold.
Or twice.
But yeah, I don't know that it had anything to do with her, but he did. He is in.
Can you just
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, just go right down.
Number 1, that would be false. You should disagree. It's sponsored content. It can be tricky. I would agree. Number 2, yeah, this does threaten U.S. democracy. Number 3, we said it's maybe a mixture. Number 4, we said let's agree. Number 5, yes, there are statistics showing that students are 25% more likely to discern real news from fake news if they are in classrooms where teachers are teaching about that. Of course, I looked to see if TrumpUniversity.edu was out there, but it was actually TrumpUniversity.com. But you can't always trust .edu and .gov, so that was number 6 is false. Number 7 is false. We'll get into that. Just because we're savvy with social media doesn't mean that we're equally perceptive about what we find there. Paul Horner, number 8, he recently died last week, and he was known for the I was given $3,500 to protest at a Trump rally, fake news story, and that's true. He claimed to be earning $10,000 to $20,000 on ad revenue. Number 9, there is truth to this statement. Not that Russian cyber actors influenced the election, but that they targeted Wisconsin. That came out in a Wisconsin State Journal news article. Number 11 we talked about. Number 12, post-truth. I think that is one of the words of the year, post-truth, from Oxford English Dictionary, so it's true. We talked about 12. Number 13, you should say, they're in the same family, but we should disagree with that statement. Fake news, clickbait, satire, like The Onion, they're not synonymous terms. 14, we talked about, that's true. 15, Brock Turner is in a intro to sociology textbook next to the definition of rape. So that's true. Yeah. Number 16, Media Bias Fact Check, which is a site that we would promote as a site to give valuable information. Christian Science Monitor and Freedom from Religion are indeed least biased sources. They categorize sources, but I wouldn't have thought that. But according to how they label most biased and least biased, those two groups fit into the least biased. Number 17, right, was not false, but that's not true. We should disagree with that. 18, teachers don't give up, neither do students give up their First Amendment right. That goes back to Tinker v. Du Moine during the Vietnam era. Number 19, Michael Bennett, this is recent, right, maybe you're seeing that on social media, but he did not burn up a flag, but that was, I think, a Photoshop image where he was in the locker room making some kind of motion and somebody added a flag that was on fire, but that was false. And then number 20 just speaks to where we're at. Monday, right? The New York Times does report that CBS News misreported the death of Tom Hanks.
There was just one comment. I was wondering if you wanted to ask or
one thing that we, at our table on number 2,
Yeah.
are we threatened by the ease with which disinformation is allowed to spread and flourish? We had a little pause there about freedom of speech, as opposed to if it just said threatened by how far it's spreading and flourishing, we wouldn't have had any argument.
Okay, so just kind of the way it was used out. We'll be coming back to that statement later about the threat of fake news and the health of our democracy. So this is a part of the day where I'm going to say, take out your smartphones. It's okay. We'll be doing a poll every year just to change up the format a little bit, and we'd like to get some information from you before we proceed. So. Has anyone not used this format for live polling? Because the first time you do it, it's just kind of like, what do you do? So you have to send a text, and none of your credentials or information are shared with anybody else. We poll everywhere. It stays within the system. So there is 22333. That's just who you text to. And you, first of all, text library poll 001. And then you'll get a message back saying that you've joined the conversation.
Then you got to give them your social security number.
Oh, I forgot to tell you that. But that's just like still reading it. I mean, after equity, like that, everybody has money. So, I did not capitalize mine. I just library poll 001, and I sent it to 22333. Like that was the phone number that I was sending it to. And then you should get an answer back right away saying that you've joined the conversation. And what we'd like you to do is answer this first question up above in the blue section. And that's me, that was test, I was just testing it. So your answers should appear anonymously. As these come up, I'd like to just maybe push the conversation a little bit further. And for those of you who are doing this already, what have you seen in your classroom? Are students responding to this, or are they getting it, or is it difficult to get messages like that across? Or do they insist, despite the fact that you could, fact check and prove the opposite? Studies have shown that people just, they don't want to believe it, so they don't. In some of my work with freshmen, undergrads, they tend to think that, well, it's fine because it's statistics, so statistics are good. that was an eye-opener for me. Okay, so what we'll do, we were just kind of, we just wanted to know what was going on, what you were doing already. So it sounds like there is a discussion that's already happening. Have any of you heard of this term, social engineering? Because I just learned about it last week. Does anyone want to share what they think or what it means to you? Because I've never heard the term before last week. So. Want to take a stab at it, Tim?
Well, it's like a group or a think tank that gets together and manages humanity, the psychological parameters that influence humans to get your needs met by your organization through social networking, face-to-face encounters to get what you want.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to pull out some really good things there.
That was like a new term for propaganda.
Yes, a new term for propaganda. So if you pull out what I pulled here, propaganda, manipulation. Do you want to go to the slide? Jim, thanks. And just the human element is what this is about. Psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. So that is social engineering. And we will give you a link to all of these slides afterwards. We've got a little reference. So that is kind of the new thing. And we will show you just a couple of examples. We have, here at the university, we have had an unprecedented amount of phishing and scamming in our emails and phone calls, that kind of thing. Every day, we're almost going to put into question our contract with Microsoft. That's from what I understood. There is so much going on, and people will invariably click on links because it looks good. And so we've been, our chief information officer is trying to teach us to look at specific things, hover over a link. If you hover over this, look what comes up down here. And so that does not match. And that is a very tangible skill that I learned also through this whole fall. So we're getting it every day, and that is partly called social engineering. Voice recognition is another social engineering tactic, where you will get a phone call from someone that you think you know, and it sounds just like them. They're asking for money for reasons that are just absolutely insane, but because it really sounds like that person, your emotions get pulled into it, and this happened to my family last week, so I know it does happen.
Yeah, and the attacks have become more sophisticated. So last year we never had the UWL logo, but when this came to my email inbox the other day, I mean, it kind of looked legitimate in some ways, and actually now some of the legitimate emails that don't have the logo, I'm confused. But I did catch, all right, usually they give me an 18-day notice or 12-day notice, but I was supposed to update my password that day. That didn't sit right with me, and I think I accidentally tried to hover over the link and actually clicked it, but I didn't enter information, but I guess this is the misinformation literacy. I guess fairly recently we've been introduced to the term real fake news, and this is part of the artificial intelligence.
We're really messing with your minds because of real fake.
Think about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job, or through Medicare or Medicaid. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups. You can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees come together to pass a communism bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community. I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama, when you're giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses.
America's businesses have created 14.5 million new jobs over 75 straight months.
With developing technology, every technology can be used in some negative way, and so we all should work towards making sure that it's not going to happen. And even one of the interesting directions is that once you know how to create something, you know how to reverse engineer it. And so you can, and so one could create methods for identifying edited videos versus real videos.
And I think this is a fairly older story going back to January.
Every once in a while, we're going to throw in a takeaway, the point that we're trying to make, and at the end we have them all on one slide. But our Chief Information Officer, this is a quote that I talked to him about this last week, and the human link is really the weakest part of the chain of online information security. We trust, we're emotionally compelled, so we click or we agree to go ahead with this. And so, unfortunately, that's just part of reality. So I think that one of the takeaways that you can take back to your students is that sometimes it starts and continues with us as a person. There's only so much that online security can do without the help of the reasons that we trust this. So what can we do to combat this? And I'm just going to run through these slides fairly rapidly. I just wanted you to know as educators that there are standards for information literacy at different levels that you, depending on the age of the student. The American Library Association, and just because librarians have kind of traditionally been associated with information literacy, this is where I go, this is what I'm bringing to you. So the American Library Association is for everybody, the entire public, and they do have information literacy standards. And I know as teachers you appreciate what standards are, what they can do. We can always teach to a standard. So they're out there, and there's a link to them at the end. As higher ed educators, we turn to the Association of College and Research Libraries because they also have a set of 21st century standards that it's called the framework. And when we teach with freshmen and sophomore student undergrads to get that that foundation in, we turn to this and we teach to that. So there's a link to that too. The American Association of School Librarians also has their own set of 21st century standards, and some of you may be familiar with those. There are common denominators among all of them, obviously and thankfully. So we're all trying to teach to the same thing. I just have some examples, but I think I'm going to let Jim talk to news literacy for time, just for the sake of time.
Yeah, I think there's this family of literacies that we think are important: information literacy, news literacy, critical literacy, misinformation literacy. But news literacy being defined as the ability to use critical thinking skills to judge reliability, credibility of news reports and whether they come from print, television, or the internet, which is one of the university.
Again, you have a link to this, so we're always coming back to the same thing, whether it be school librarians or ALA or the higher education. So access, it's about accessing, about evaluating, incorporating, using, and understanding ethically. So it all goes into that pot of skills. Okay. So this is where the CRAAP comes in. And have any of you heard of this CRAAP test? Okay, good. I'm glad because it's being used. It is slowly being replaced by something else. I don't know why. Maybe the word CRAAP is being offensive to some educators, which is why I always refer to it as AA CRAAP. But basically, it's got the same skill set and the same things that you want your students to remember and practice. So it's an easy test, and you can remember CRAAP. You don't necessarily remember what is the C, what is the R, but once you've got it down, not only is it an easy tool to always take with you, it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife that you always have in your pocket. It's also a really good habit to get into. And once you get into this, and you can go down the CRAAP, you can evaluate a website or an online source very, very quickly. And I'm speaking to things that you will be teaching students. So currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and the purpose. This is what we teach, this is what we use with our undergrads.
Other acronyms that we came across, RADAR is another acronym that is related to this, but are there other tests out there that you use?
Well, whoever came up with the AA CRAAP thought that maybe they were being a little sassy, you know, I don't know. But it gets the message across. Okay. Data literacy is the latest literacy to join the family of literacy. We've talked about information literacy, news literacy, and now data literacy is kind of the next one. So this is just a real short video that talks about what data literacy is. You can bring up the Okay, now this is really where it starts. Financial literacy might also be a sister term for data literacy. We're starting to work with freshmen and sophomore here with financial literacy also. But so, according to this video, understanding how companies collect and use your data that you provide. Engage in debates about governing data, open data and big data, being able to use data. Those are the things that I brought out from this video, but there are two that I added myself. And it's being able to analyze data, being able to visually understand data, because it is portrayed in visual ways more and more, you know, with infographics or whatever, and just being able to quickly understand what that means. And something that he really didn't mention, or that didn't come out very strongly, is identifying the source of the data. Where is this data coming from? For me, that is almost the most important. Where is this data coming from? Who is providing it? I just spoke to this, you know, kind of that conclusion. Oh, can I just, if you click on that tips link, it's going to take you to a site that I would recommend that you peruse at some point. It's again in our list of references. This was creating data literate students was a 2-year project that just ended in September from the University of Michigan. And the University of Michigan is one of the bigger players in library and information science schools. We always turn to the University of Michigan as, you know, new and exciting things that are happening. And they did this 2-year project that just ended, where they took high school teachers and school librarians, and for 2 years had this data literacy and created materials and had a conference so that you could take those things back to the classroom. And because it's been so recent, they haven't produced anything yet, but if you go to the virtual conference over on the right, and just go to the schedule, and just kind of scroll down, you will see what people, what speakers presented, and you can have a video, chat, transcripts, slides, resource lists, and so that is very, very useful. So for data literacy. So those are things that you can take back and use in your classroom. The other thing I was just going to show quickly, if you go back to that presentation, and then the Pew Research Center, I'm sure that you've heard of and used this. That was a link, just that blue one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I always use this as a place where you can go to get sources They call themselves a fact tank, nonpartisan. They are pulling together statistics about current issues, trends, attitudes that are going on not only in the United States but the world. It's a very user-friendly site, and it is, for me, a completely reliable source of information. So you can sign up for their daily newsletter, or their monthly. It's just, if you like statistics, it's kind of a fun place to go to, and definitely one that you can share with your students.
So I think that making connections in my work begin to another literacy out there, disciplinary literacy. Much of what I think we've been talking about is what I think historians do when they encounter a variety of sources. So one resource that we wanted to have you thinking about today was just how an activity for evaluating sources. And this is coming from the Stanford History Education group. A brief activity for you at your table to talk about I think that there are 6 questions, and then you're given 2 sources, and the conversation is about which source would be more reliable. For us to think about the notion that historical understanding is intertextual, whatever decision you made here, you would want to corroborate in some way. And I think that's what historians understand, and maybe it's not always practiced by our students. But the first, the first question, who was present, I think everybody probably discounted the Hollywood film. There's sort of no standard for accuracy, right, that we think of when it comes to Hollywood films. Historians, on the other hand, have some standards that they're expected to live up to. What did you say for number 2? What would be a more trustworthy, credible source?
One.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that's the case that Sam Weinberg and his colleagues at Stanford History, in the Stanford History Ed group, of course, we know audiences shape the stories that we tell. And while that story could be told from a variety of perspectives, you can imagine in 1936 that a former slave might be second-guessing himself about revealing too much about what he really felt to the white female. Not to say that the source would be accurate, but there could be some exaggeration. But of the 2, certainly source 1. Number 3, was it more credible? 2, human memory, notoriously unreliable. Number 4, Japanese internment. Yeah, you could expect some propaganda in that source 1, right? 1942 versus a classified report. And number 5, atrocities during the Vietnam War. I think I've heard people say this sworn testimony would be held in higher regard than someone touring without being held to the same standard. And this number 6, what happened at the Battle of Bighorn?
We don't like that.
Good. Yeah, I don't think either of them are sort of more credible than the other. We think that they both would contain misinformation, perhaps, or information that is slanted one way or the other. Textbooks notoriously terrible in reporting true accounts anyway. So in addition to that handout, what we distributed is the historical thinking chart, again from the Stanford History Ed group. And in terms of habit development, I would say this seems to be how we're developing future historians in terms of these habits. Sourcing, contextualization, close reading, and corroboration. So just a handout for you.
Yeah, that might be another takeaway, is to suggest that students read and consume information like a historian would. If there's no proof or empirical evidence, it's just, it's fiction. So.
And I think for many of us, some of these questions are like automatic, but what we're learning as we study middle and high school students, these are not always automatic questions that they're asking. It's kind of habit. And I think we maybe have time for one more activity with us. Again, this is coming from something called the International Fact-Checking Day. Everybody is familiar with April 1st as the April Fool's Day. April 2nd is International Fact-Checking Day. And so this activity that we'll work through in the next couple of minutes, coming from that organization, I think it's part of Pointer, but I came across it through the National Council of Teachers of English. And so what we are going to be kind of asking you to make a decision about is the topic of voluntary voting or versus mandatory voting. So we live in a country that provides for voluntary voting, but there are nations that it's mandatory. So talk, I guess, as your group, what is it that you agree with? So hopefully by now you have sort of this questionnaire in front of you in the 4-page document. You've checked the option that you agree with, that you think voluntary voting is better, or you think mandatory voting is better. And then what we would ask you to do is to, of the 3 articles that are below that checkbox, which one would you share on social media? My wife said, I don't share anything on social media, but I'm forcing you to make a decision. Which one of these would you share? So if at all possible, is there someone that already made a decision? Which one would you share? The first one. The first one, and why would you share the first one? It appears to be non-biased. It presented facts.
It's informational. I like the chart. We're just providing that information about those countries.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. Of the 3 sources, right, that's the only one that presents any facts. And so I think that International Fact Checking Day, this is an excerpt of the lesson plan, but one thing we could ask students to do is go through one thing they found is that many students didn't even look at the articles. They just made their opinion and then shared the article that aligned with their personal beliefs about voluntary or mandatory reporting. But we go through the articles and you could highlight facts, opinions, and I think that would help flesh some things out for students. But we want to ask students, why did you share what you read? Did you read it before you shared it? What was the strongest argument made? Do you believe it to be truthful or not? Would you use it as a source for a school assignment? And did your personal opinion get in the way of what you shared?
So you know, a student could use that AA CRAAP test. You know, this is an example of where they would apply that. Okay. Have any of you heard of this executive report that's been making headlines in the past year, since a year ago? So there's a link to it, and you don't have to link to it, Jim, but it's included in your list of references. So Stanford Graduate School of Education did this study, and it is actually amazing because what the results show are students displayed a remarkable inability to determine what is true from information published online. They had results from 7,804 students, from middle schoolers to college students, for teaching purposes. They were shown blog posts, Twitter, Facebook feeds, forums, digital messages, among other content that help shape public opinion. They were unable to identify benchmarks and symbols used online to indicate reliability of sources. I think Facebook has or had a blue check. as an example. And it's you know, this report is, the summary of this report is 30 pages long, so you know, if you really want a good read, you know, go ahead and read it. But the bottom line of this is that researchers are fearing that if this trend does persist, it could undermine American democracy, which takes us back to that the first little discussion we had. By the way that disinformation about civic issues is allowed to spread or spread, whether we mean to or not. So that's the bottom line of this study. And so for me, this really rings true because the link between digital literacy and and an informed citizenship for me is just fundamental. So it's a report that's been going around and people have been referring to it. So it came out a year ago, and definitely go ahead and look at the link. You know, it was a study done. So.
And what you see in front of you is an excerpt, I think, of one of the tests that they had middle school students. I think they piloted maybe 170 students. And one thing that they learned, as you can see on the back of the sheet, there's an overview. But essentially, many students could not discern that sponsored content is an advertisement. They didn't recognize that. They thought it must be sponsored by, in this case, Slate magazine, an online store. But that was a key finding, I think, because I hope many of us in this room would see sponsored content and we know that it would just be an advertisement, but students in middle school grade were struggling with that.
And as that goes back to the CRAAP test, what we try to do here with undergrads is, that corresponds to the P in the AA CRAAP test, is the purpose. You know, if there is advertising, then there is a purpose to try to get you to click on something or buy something, as opposed to unbiased information.
So they had, one activity was a homepage analysis. I think they did several of them. The example that's kind of publicly available is the slate.com. We don't have time to do this, but students also evaluated this picture purportedly from the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan. And they were just asked, does this post provide strong evidence about the conditions near the power plant, and explain your reasoning? And I think that as teachers, this is the challenge that we face, that while we might be able to help students understand homepages, when it comes to photos on Imgur, we might have a harder time determining credibility. And it turns out that this photo, it was widely circulated, but some things that stand out to me, maybe right in blue at the top, please Google Shaker America, please Google David Kelly. Maybe those are signs to me something's not right here. I have to investigate what that is, but like I said, the Stanford Ed group categorized students' responses to this picture and whether it provided evidence that it actually was taken there. Overwhelmingly, students thought it was provided evidence, although they would have liked to see animals more so than plants. The homepage analysis, the photo, and then they have students, they're introduced to a Twitter feed. This shows up on your Twitter feed, and then they have to evaluate that. And many students didn't sort of try to find out what CAP means, Center for American Progress, but if they did, they might have found out this kind of a liberal-leaning advocacy organization, MoveOn.org, more known for liberal advocacy. There was a professional polling involved, and so those were some of the ideas that students were writing about that helped them make a decision that this was a credible post or not. But again, this is a challenge that we face as teachers, having students evaluate claims on social media. And I say the Stanford History Ed group, it was like a paper and pencil format, so they've been criticized for having students evaluate web claims paper and pencil. But they tried to account for the fact that some schools don't have access to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so let's just go past this. These were our main takeaways for you, so again, the human link is the weakest link and the most easiest to manipulate, even in terms of online security. The human link is the place that is easier for hackers to get through than actually trying to find passwords and other hacking devices. Digital natives are not necessarily digital literate. The need to be self-aware of one's emotions, beliefs, and opinions cannot be understated when we consume, share, and generate information.
We need to corroborate our sources with additional evidence, and we need to be developing other critical thinking skills.
Right, like more like thinking like a historian, for example. And then this literacy trilogy is just information, news, and data is what I was referring to that. Is vital for the future of health and democracy. So those are some of the takeaways that but we have an epilogue with this latest incident, unfortunate incident in Las Vegas. Jim came up with this amazing article last night about how it's already generating fake news, and so I went ahead and read this and briefly just some of the bullet points that came out of this. Somebody started to generate news about this, falsely accusing a man of being the shooter just hours afterwards. Evidently that went viral and started a snowball of fake news.
The number one Google story about who was the shooter.
Right. And because search engines like Google are configured to crawl the web and pull up things that have been clicked on and that are popular, this fake news just kept rising to the top and staying there. And it's a perfect case of automation that cannot keep up with the fast-paced clicking of human clicking. The apologies from the search engines, they apologized, and Google did, and they will continue to make algorithmic improvements to prevent this from happening in the future. But the damage is already done, and we know that tomorrow could start another one. So this is the world we live in. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but this is the world that we live in and wade through. One solution that they talked about possibly is for Google to be reconfigured to not put as much importance and weight on some of these websites that are churning out this, like the one that they cite is 4chan. But can machines, the question is can machines understand context to decide if it's credible or not in terms of artificial intelligence? I don't know that we have that answer yet. I think artificial intelligence is making leaps and bounds, and someday we'll wake up and machines will be able to do incredibly scary things, but I don't think that they're there yet. Engineers, another thought that came out of this is that engineers and journalists do not think the same way. Engineers who create Google and search engines are all about designing a product that works well, and journalists have a different mission, so they don't think the same way. And the final thought that came out of this article is that it is not realistic to expect perfect filtering in our day and age where we have 24/7 news all the time, being generated all the time. So that was just the most recent.
Well, we're hoping that we can have you do and just jot down a few thoughts about key learning for the day and new questions that you have, just a reaction from our talk. But I think Dave Baker is up next. And yes, if you want, can you have the Yeah, absolutely.
We'll make their presentation available on the workshop website on the WHSFA.
And Peter. By looking
I need to get more.
What table is it?
I will run over and make more photocopies of our reference sheet. I think the photocopier stopped spitting out, and I didn't realize it had stopped, and then I left. So,
if you have a PDF of it, we can also post it.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and before you leave, you'll all have references.